Really, really excited to chat with you guys. So this is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about, obviously, because we're building in this field and we're building a Copilot for product teams. How I ended up in this space, kind of a little bit of my journey, as Rishi mentioned, before starting Kraftful, I led product teams of various tech companies. I've really done everything from been, PM number 2 at a fast growing unicorn to heading up product management teams where we were working on products that were touching millions of users. And so I've really seen teams struggle with listening to users at scale to incorporate user feedback from surveys, user interviews, app store reviews, support tickets, sales calls, social media, really anywhere where users are providing feedback on products. And then I was lucky to be one of the earliest alpha users of GPT-3. And that's really, when I got to experiment with trying to fix this use case really for myself, trying to build a solution to be able to listen to users at scale, because I thought that was going to be a perfect use case for large language models. So that's kind of how I got to build with AI tools to supercharge product managers. I've now given quite a few talks about AI and product management lately. And the one impression I'm getting from just chatting with the audience is that everyone's really trying to figure out how to use AI in their day-to-day. And I think, I've talked a lot about this topic at a higher level. So today I'm actually going to try to do something slightly different. My goal with this session is to give you an overview of how to use AI and product management in a very kind of practical way with a practical twist. So I'm going to start by talking about quite generally kind of where I think AI is going to be most useful over time in product management, but then quickly jump to a much more practical application of how to use a general purpose tool like ChatGPT as your own personal product coach, and then do a deep dive into a few AI tools that can help with product analytics, and then finish with how to use AI in user research, which is of course kind of the space in which we're building. And my goal is to both show you what you can do and also give you a kind of under the hood kind of look to see how these tools actually work. And I'll do it a zoom in on Kraftful in particular, because there I have a little bit more of a control on giving you a under the hood look. All right, let's dive in. So we've all seen this visual, I'm sure, of what PMs do. It shows us product managers sitting perfectly in the middle, strategically, right, between customer needs, the technology we're building, the business we're building around that product. But that's not the reality. The reality is we do a ton of different things, and kind of the sad truth about that reality is really that ultimately we can't do it all. And so I think the piece that I've really seen product teams struggle with is that we don't really have time to listen to customers and users as much as we would like to. We don't have time to effectively engage them in the product development process. And instead we spend a ton of time coordinating the stakeholders, grooming the backlog, politics, all kinds of other things that are much more visible to our coworkers. And so ultimately, we don't have time to be as strategic as we would like to be. And that's where I think the product management field is about to change pretty drastically, because AI is here to supercharge product managers. And I think, one important thing to note when looking at AI tools with their current capabilities, quirks, limitations, all of that is pretty temporary. I think the tools are evolving very, very quickly. And I say this, having experimented with GPT technology over the past few years, there's already been a giant leap between what you could achieve with early GPT-3 back, when it was in beta in 2020, and what you can do with ChatGPT today. And you can expect at least that same pace of development going forward. So I think that, what do I think you could do with AI? Most obviously, you could do lots and lots of user research. That's the first, PM use case that we're building at Kraftful, the ability to use AI in product research. That includes summarizing feedback from user interviews, surveys, app store reviews, really anywhere where you get user feedback. The ability to extract things like feature requests, how frequently do those requests come up, the context in which those feature requests commonly come up, what users do while they're not having access to those features, all of those pain points. And then the ability to perform new user research to discover things that haven't yet been shared in the feedback you've been getting. So, when it becomes really easy to go back to a user who's previously already given you feedback in the past and ask them more information, that really changes how you do research. So you don't have to kind of cherry pick a group of users and then try to ask them a ton of questions. Instead, you can ask just one question to lots and lots of users, and it's going to be personalized to them, and it's going to be personalized based on the information they've already previously provided and the channel in which they're providing that feedback. So that could be something as extensive as a support ticket and you're providing feedback, or a short tweet. And then being able to obviously gather all of that feedback asynchronously at any point in time whenever you happen to have a question, or anyone else on the team happens to have a question. That really changes everything about how we discover what users need. And then once you have all of that data, AI can help you build a roadmap for it. It can help you prioritize features. It can help you formulate the product definition using all of the best practices, but then applying it to your specific product or feature. And today, you can do a lot of these things in Kraftful. I'll show you how. But I think that over time, product managers will be able to use all of that to be much more strategic and have all of the logistics handled by AI, which is kind of what I think is really exciting. And then communication with stakeholders. I will give kind of more practical applications of how this can be done, but this is kind of just high level to set the stage. So, here I'm talking about when an engineer picks up a task in Jira, they should be able to automatically get access to all of the context, right? It's a clearly communicated user story, but then you have like the curious engineer who want to know, why we're really working on this, right? And they should be able to click through and see both kind of all of the user research that led to a task, but then also all of the team discussion, all of that kind of internal strategic direction from execs. All of that should be summarized in the ticket. And by the way, when we talk about an engineer in this context, it's probably not going to be in the future a code writer. She will be an AI operator, just like the PM. A lot of what PMs do today is about checking in with everyone, giving updates. And so I think kind of once we're able to share context in a much more transparent way, a lot of that coordination is really going to be handled by AI, so that we have much more time to be strategic in our work. So, by now, I think it's pretty obvious what we think I will say about product marketing, because after all, generative AI was always best at generating text. So of course it can generate product marketing material. But the cool thing is that when it can do that with all of the context that was previously provided from the users in terms of what their pain points were. So you can incorporate that in the material, in the marketing material. All right, let's jump to something a little bit more practical and look at some practical examples. So here I pulled up a ChatGPT conversation, and I'm using a prompt to ask ChatGPT to put together a table of metrics and opportunities for a specific product using the R framework. And in this case, I'm using both ChatGPT and a plugin that we developed at Kraftful that's using 80+ top product resources to make the output really good for product managers. And then rather than describing the specific product, in this case, I picked Twitter just because ChatGPT will have context on what Twitter is, but of course, you can imagine actually describing what your product is here. And then I'm getting metrics in areas of improvement that ChatGPT suggested for me. Now, if this was actually my product and I was in the process of doing this, I would then have a back and forth conversation with ChatGPT to give me some more feedback on on this table to make it more useful for me specifically. Okay, so let's look at what ChatGPT is doing here, right? So do that under the hood view. This is really my Yana's under the hood show of how it actually works. Once this prompt is sent into ChatGPT, the model translates the message into tokens, which is common sequence of characters found in a set of text. And based on all the text that ChatGPT has been trained on, the model then learns to understand the statistical relationship between these tokens, which are usually just words, but sometimes it's parts of words, so that it can predict the most likely token to follow the sequence of tokens in the prompt. And a sequence of these statistically most likely tokens or words actually turns out to include what we humans often think of as human reasoning. So you get a logical answer back. And on top of that is sort of what we've layered with the Kraftful plugin, which sits on top of ChatGPT. It parses your question and it picks the most relevant product resources and sends them along in the context of your request to ChatGPT. And this context then influences what ChatGPT statistically most likely returns to you as the output. So it becomes something a little bit more similar to a product coach that is kind of leveraging their knowledge, or in this case, a handful of blog posts or articles to give you something that's a little bit more relevant to the question that you're asking. Of course, the answer was already relevant, but this will be a little bit more high quality than just generally searching the internet and getting kind of some of the most highest things that showed up. Let's look at another example. Here I'm looking at a detailed guide to build a product roadmap for my specific product. Again, I just used Twitter in this screenshot. And you can see it put together a guide for me. And it also links to the specific resources that the Kraftful plugin gathered and sent in with the context. And then we can click through to those to read more. Another example. In this case, I am still the Twitter PM, and I'm looking for inspiration of what KPIs I should look at to figure out Twitter's market performance. Again, it gives me some high-level information, and in this case, I probably would want to do a little bit more of back and forth, where I would ask it, how would I then calculate daily active users? How would I track that? What are some best practices, right? Like I would probably want to do a little bit more follow-up. A few more practical examples. Here's another example. I have a list of items that I included in my release, and now I need to put together an announcement email to users. If this was me, I would probably have quite a bit of back and forth to get the tone right. I'm generally much more informal than ChatGPT tends to be, and so I usually end up asking it quite often to can you say this as if you were talking to different friends? Can you say it in a way where you would want users to actually be happy with me and not feel like I'm a bot? Right, so there's some back and forth that you may have. Here's another example. And in this case, I actually recommend using it without the Kraftful plugin because the plugin doesn't work well with the image recognition feature yet. Here I'm uploading a screenshot of my website, and I'm asking ChatGPT to spot a few areas of usability improvements. And then to make the improvements more targeted, I'm actually describing my product, because if you can kind of empathize with ChatGPT, all it sees is the screenshots of my product. So it doesn't actually know what it does and what features it has. So I may want to describe those in a little bit more detail to get more meaningful information back. Another example, in this case, I actually would use it with the Kraftful plugin. Here, I would like to get some suggestions for survey questions about the recent product release. And so again, I would include the release here. I mean, I even include exactly the same stuff that I included when I was asking it to draft my communication with users. But in this case, I'm getting actual survey questions that I can send along. We have more of these prompts on our website, so you can check out. There's lots and lots of great things you can do with ChatGPT. You can check out this link for 40 more things to do. But what I actually wanted to do is to dive a little bit deeper into using AI in analytics. And practically speaking, GPT-3 API has been available for a few years. But really, I would say that product analytics providers mostly started feeling the pressure to launch LLM-powered features after the ChatGPT came out last fall, and then particularly when the ChatGPT API was launched in March, which is when most companies kind of started trying to figure out how to use ChatGPT. And so since then, all analytics providers have been working hard to launch AI features, starting with a company called June in April, Mixpanel in July, and then Amplitude in August. Interestingly, when Amplitude launched, they said that here's when their launch announcement on LinkedIn, that they were the very first to launch this publicly, and then they invited everyone to go and check it out. Interestingly, it actually is still not available. So if you click through that link, you get to marketing video, and then ultimately you get to this form. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to try out this feature. We are an Amplitude customer. I have signed up quite a while ago. It's still not available for us. Unfortunately, same things with Mixpanel. So if you haven't tried any of these features yet, you shouldn't feel bad. They're actually not available to most folks. But June did make their feature available, and so we're a June customer as well, and I've had a chance to use this quite a bit. And I would say that it's very similar to what Amplitude and Mixpanel described in their launch material. You can ask questions in plain language and then learn what users do with your product. What then happens under the hood is that June uses GPT-4 to translate this question, like how many users signed up last week, into an SQL query that can then be executed on their database. This doesn't look like standard SQL to me, so I think it probably, it may be specific to their database. But you can do more complex things, like how many users use this feature every 2 weeks for the past 2 months. But then you really need to break this up into multiple questions where you do a bit of back and forth. So it really does require you to know quite a bit of SQL to be able to use this feature. But it definitely does save you time. To give you a little bit more of kind of under the hood view into this, you may be wondering, how does June get from my question to an SQL query? Under the hood, June rephrases your question based on what it knows about your data, event names, and so on. And then it sends your modified question as part of instructions to the ChatGPT API. What you're looking at here, the screenshot, is a visual representation of what a call to that API looks like. It's not unlike ChatGPT, but you have a little bit more knobs to adjust how the model will respond. On the side, you have a system prompt that tells the model some underlying information. In this case, I put in some things that I think June would know about your data. And then you can adjust things like which model you use. Like, you can say, I want to use GPT-4, I want to use GPT 3.5. How creative you want the output to be. That's the temperature. Temperature 0 is the least creative and most factual. And then you can define how long you want the output to be. So here I'm really guessing what June's prompt may have looked like. Before sending it over, they're probably looking for phrases in my question, like sign up, and replacing them with the events that they think sign up events may be. Another approach is that they may be having the model provide an output that has gaps that they can fill in with events afterwards. I'm sure they've experimented both to see which one gives them the best performance. And then very similar to kind of what we're looking at before, right? Once this prompt is sent into the ChatGPT API, the model translates it into tokens so that it can predict what is the most likely token to follow the sequence of tokens in the prompt. But because the model has been trained both on text and code, it can predict both how a person would reply to me and also the SQL code that person would write for me. And June may be telling this model to reply only in code if they wanted to make it easy for them, or they may be looking for code in the output. It could go both ways. Okay. And then the last piece that I just wanted to point out is that you can technically do the same thing yourself inside ChatGPT. You can try to get it to write an SQL query for you, and then see if it gives you the information that you're looking for. If you don't know SQL one way to check that the query is doing what you hope to do is to then just like copy and paste it into a new ChatGPT thread and ask it to explain to you in plain language what's happening in the query. Cool. I'm going to jump to user research. And here, I'm actually going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump into a quick demo to give you a sense of how this would work. Okay. So what this tool is doing essentially, you're able to connect lots and lots of different sources of user feedback, over 35 different sources, and then once you've done that, let me do that real quick. This app, this app, 30 days of feedback. You're then able to connect it to a Slack channel so that it posts to Slack every time you get feedback from your users, so you don't kind of have to be the bearer of bad news. If there's any bad feedback from users, you also get this via email. And what we do under the hood is that we are every day collecting user feedback from all of those sources that you've connected to Kraftful, and then we send you summaries of those, and they also show up in the platform. I'm going to pull up, this is now analyzing, but while it does that, like a cooking show, I'm going to pull up one for you that already has connected previously, and switched over to the Android App Store reviews for Nest. And once you've connected a source, you get summaries of top feature requests, most loved features, competitors, and complaints. And all of these, just so you can see it all. And for all of these, you can do things like obviously get them for different time periods, and you can see kind of how many reviews you have for each time period and getting this analyzed. You can, of course, do an analysis across all of your different sources that you've connected, and either group them and do analysis across a few of them, or do a general summary across all of your user feedback. Once you have this feedback, in addition to kind of summarizing it and extracting product insights like feature requests, you can also go a little bit deeper. So a few different ways to do that is you can see how frequently did my issues come up, and you can look at those specific mentions to kind of understand a little bit more, get a little bit more context and read in context. And another thing you can do is that you can chat with your user feedback. So you can say, what do users say about Users say about using, what do users do? What do users do instead while the scheduling confusing? We manually have to adjust the temperature instead of using the scheduling feature, right? So you can kind of go deeper and start asking a little bit more questions around what users generally say when they talk about this feature, what their pain point is, how they're trying to solve this pain point today, and then what do users say about there's no mentions of pink elements. This, what I'm trying to illustrate is the fact that this chat is kind of trained to act a little bit more like a product manager or a UX researcher, and it is constrained by the context provided to it. So it's unlikely to be trying to amuse you with stories of pink elephants. If you're asking you things that isn't part of the feedback, it's really not going to engage. It will tell you that there isn't anything. And then, once you've gotten all of that context and feedback, and you have a good sense of what you may want to start interacting with, you may want to invite your team to come and look at it. You may want to export it to PDF or CSV. But you may also say, actually, I have enough interesting things here that I do want to act on this, and I want us to start working on it. So you may say, okay, I'm interested in the flexible schedule, and I want to have, I want to integrate with calendar apps and platforms. Those two things somewhat. So let me go and read some user stories. So we can say remember first stories. Now it's writing user stories for us. And obviously with user stories, it's something that's it's based off of all of the feedback that users have provided around this feature, but you will of course know other things about your product that users are not going to know about. So you will obviously probably use them as a first draft and then want to edit it and make sure that it includes more context, right? So this is really just the first draft. And there we have it. So now we pushed it to Jira, so you can go and edit it here. But you also have a link back so that your team can I not edit it? Well, if I were to open this link here, it then gives the context for this particular feature. So you know. Cool. I wonder if I have more time to do a little bit more under the hood, or if this is a good time to jump to Q&A.
I think this is a good time to jump into Q&A. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think you covered a lot of the use cases that product managers often have to sort of jump into and do on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, a lot of that included like user research and doing the more tactical elements of product management. Wonder what your thoughts are around doing the more strategic pieces using ChatGPT, things like sequencing or prioritizations of these asks, and how do you see the set of tooling evolving to solve for those contexts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the strategic piece is always going to fall on the product manager. And I get this question a lot actually, because people are sort of, well, you're summarizing all of the user feedback that users have said, but like users are just going to ask us about the faster horse, but what about the car? And I think that the car is really the product manager's responsibility to look at all the pain points that users are describing get a sense of how frequently things come up, what code users are using when they're talking about it, and being able to do that quickly. But I think ultimately that strategic piece around what's the thing we need to build to really solve the user needs, I think that's really where the product management, that's where we humans can shine. So, and so I think that that's really will be falling on the product managers to then use all of the time that has been freed up to strategically be able to figure out what's the next thing that should be built based on everything I now know from the users.
And so strategy is one piece where, tooling is still is still evolving to meet the needs. What are some of the other buckets where you think that like PMs will have to do a lot of the heavy lifting as opposed to like tooling using ChatGPT or AI?
Yeah. I think that I do think that strategy is really the one remaining piece. I do think that having looked at a lot of tools around analytics and data, that is it's starting to be solved, but I think there's still a lot of, I kind of mentioned this when looking at some of the analytics tools, you kind of need to know SQL still to be able to navigate how to structure your prompt to be able to solve this problem. So there's really some aspects that aren't quite solved yet. I do think that it's a matter of time, absolutely, right? Like this field is moving so quickly that I would imagine that it's going to be solved very quickly. But there's some kind of specific aspects around AI where the kind of the rough edges are still so rough that there's quite a lot of work to be done, like for a PM. A lot around also kind of, while we don't have the tools around like stakeholder communication and all of that back and forth, I think that still is on the table until there's tools for that. I do think, like, we're obviously building those tools, and so I would say that hopefully will be solved soon, but today that still is not solved, I would say.
Awesome. Thank you for the insight. And I think one topic that comes up often with AI is around like privacy and sharing the context within like customer data or like company specific knowledge. In terms of privacy, what are some of the considerations that PM should make when using tools like ChatGPT or third-party tools, and how can they overcome any of the challenges as related to privacy?
Yeah, I think it's important to look at what are the data practices in tools, right? ChatGPT specifically does have a way to use it with the zero retention policy. Tools that have built on the ChatGPT API also, they have certain agreements with OpenAI. Then they also can have a zero retention policy. We do, for example. And so I think like looking at what's data is being sent in and how is that being used, that's an important piece. I would say, actually looking at what are large language models doing with data, and I was sort of hoping to show that a little bit more with kind of the fact that they're really just looking at words as tokens and then returning the statistically most likely thing, right? They're not sharing full on context or copying anything back and forth, which I think is sort of like a big assumption when it comes to privacy and concerns around privacy. Is sort of this idea that if I enter this into the model and the model gets trained on it, what if the model then returns exactly what I said? Now, if the model is not being trained on it anyways, and you can have a zero retention policy, but even if you didn't, there is this aspect that actually what the model does is something very different, right? It's not actually copying and pasting chunks of text back and forth. And so I think those underlying concerns are sometimes a little bit misguided in some sense. I think just generally looking at SaaS tools in the same way as you would normally be looking at SaaS tools, right? Like the tools you use to collect user feedback, you would normally want to see, do they have good security practices? Are they encrypting data? in transit and addressed, and like all the different things that that security teams and IT teams look at. I think that very much still applies, and it's as important as ever, because it is user data that's often being used to analyze these concepts.
Awesome. Thanks for the insightful answer. I think the next question we have here is around like soft skills versus hard skills. I think people recognize that, you know, a lot of the hard skills are things that you can use technology and like get better at. What are some of the ways in which PMs can use AI to basically improve like soft skills? And this may include a range of topics such as, you know, influence or stakeholder management or presentation skills, so on and so forth. So what are your thoughts around how that'll change using artificial intelligence or chat GPT or sequence models?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually so interesting that large language models in particular are so useful for this particular purpose, right? Because you can imagine, as a human being, emotionally charged around the topic, right? And you need to write some communication to someone. And this idea that you could just take what you need to respond to, enter it into ChatGPT and ask for a polite response, and you can even like specify a few like bullet points or something, and get back something. And ultimately, I think the added human soft skills on top of that is that you'll probably want to edit the output still, but you will kind of be able to put emotions aside and write something that's very it's going to be much more effective, right? I think that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg kind of thing that can be done with ChatGPT today. I think over time, just this idea that I have some information and I need to communicate this information to lots of people on my team. And what if I don't have to communicate this information to these people on my team, but my system knows when to communicate this information to different stakeholders? And it can write that communication in a way that takes both the stakeholders' role and personality into account and writes it in the most effective way for them, right? That's sort of like that. That's the dream of soft skills that I think every PM would really love to have a system like that in place. And I do think that we're not too far away from that today.
The next question we have is around like PMs require a lot of context to do their work properly and successfully. There's a lot of like various orgs that you're collaborating with, be it like sales, marketing, support, legal, etc. How can are there tools, platforms, or methods in which you can pull all of this context and or data into one of the apps such as ChatGPT? Like, how do you get ChatGPT or AI to be more aware about the specific context that's needed for your role?
Yeah, I don't. You can set some context to ChatGPT. So you could, there's personalized settings. I forget what that feature is called, but there's something like that where you can literally just like use that to say, I, Yana Welinder, am a PM on this team that's working on product X, and you can describe your product, and you can say, here's my team members, here's their roles, here's their various personalities, so that if you then use it kind of just as a coach to like give you feedback on what to do or write certain pieces for different people, you can kind of just say, write this note for Sam, and it will know that Sam's actually your product marketing counterpart, and here's what Sam is interested in, and have all of that context handy, so you don't have to like copy and paste that every time into ChatGPT.
Awesome. And the last question coming in is, how do you see AI evolving to suit the needs of various PMs at various companies? There are obviously like large and small companies, and they're also spread out, like geographically spread out, so on and so forth. Some of them are distributed, some of them may be local. So what's your take on like, where is AI most suited to create a durable impact? Is it across all of these companies, or are you seeing pockets where the adoption will happen sooner than others?
Good question. I think that's, I think that it will really depend on who is building these tools and what is their bias. And I say this from a very personal perspective. So my experience is that I've mostly been a startup PM. I've worked sometimes on kind of, post product market fit products, but that was still in organizations that operated much more like startups than enterprises. That's been my bias, obviously, right? I'm a startup founder. That's kind of what I the kind of context I enjoy the most in. I've always kind of tried to when enterprises have reached out, I've always felt very kind of wary of how much politics is there going to be and that kind of stuff. And so when building Kraftful in the kind of the first iteration, it ended up being a tool that was most suited for, I think, startup PMs, in that it was very much focused on how to build, like what to build, like find out what to build, and just help me like listen to all the users so that I can just learn what I need to know, right? And then as I started getting lots of feedback from users, there was a lot of feedback around what ultimately, eventually, I realized are about how we tell a story of why I decided that this is what I need to build. I need to be able to bring people along, and this is kind of more of the enterprise use case. I need to be able to bring people along and tell the story. And I think, at some point I was brainstorming with our VP of engineering around the feedback we were getting, and her experience is, she's been a senior director of product at Salesforce, and so just has had like much more of that enterprise side PM experience. And so to her, it was very obvious, like this is a really, really big pain point. Like you need to be able to tell a story. And so that's when we kind of started really building out that use case too. That's there's two sides to product management. One is figuring out what to build. The other is telling a story, and we need to be able to serve them both. But I think that hopefully kind of shows you a sense, gives you a sense of like the builder of the tool then is sort of like who guides where it can be used, right? I built the tool first primarily for kind of more the startup use case, and now we're building for enterprises too. And I think that that's going to be the case for a lot of these solutions, depending on who happens to be the first few people building the tools to be used. They will get more or less adoption in those areas.
Awesome. This was an amazing presentation, and thank you for taking the time to walk our community through how AI can be used in their day-to-day. I think this will be super impactful for a lot of the PMs on the call, and I'm sure many of them will go back, download the prompt list, and start jumping into how they can use AI right away.
I'm so excited. Yeah, feel free to ping me if you have any feedback or questions or thoughts on this as you get experimenting.
Really quickly, I'm not sure if you saw this, Rishi. Somebody's asking for a link that was cut off, the link for the prompts for product managers on the Kraftful website. Do you think that you could paste that into the chat really quick?
Yes, happy to do that. Or if you guys have access to it, you can do it. Otherwise, I can do that. You just get to that slide real quick.
Rishi, you were able to see everything that was in the Q&A, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and thank you, Rishi, for hosting us, and thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.